The first snow of the season was coming down in fat, lazy flakes when my brother-in-law told the caterer there'd been a little confusion about the head count and that my daughter and I would be more comfortable waiting in the lobby. I didn't make a fuss. I just nodded, took my girl's mittened hand, and walked back out into the cold. What he didn't know was that the lodge he'd booked for his big night, the one with the timber beams and the lake view everyone in Muskoka fought to rent, had my signature on 3 years of its permits. By the time the bill came, he'd learn exactly what my name was worth. Let me back up, because if I just tell you about that night, you'll think I'm the kind of woman who ruins parties. I'm not. I spent 31 years being the opposite of that. My name doesn't matter much for this, but my sister's does, because Whitney has always been the one people remember. Growing up in Barrie, she was the one who got the solos in the Christmas concert, the one whose teachers wrote little notes home about her sparkle. I was the one who reminded everybody to bring their boots. When our dad's heart gave out the winter I turned 19, it was me who sat at the kitchen table with the funeral home pamphlets and our mother's checkbook, figuring out what we could afford. Whitney cried beautifully at the service. People held her. I handled the catering invoice and made sure the parking was sorted. That was the arrangement. Unspoken but ironclad. She glowed. I managed. So when she married Roland, it fit. Roland came from a family in Oakville that had just enough money to be snobbish about it and not quite enough to actually be rich, which in my experience is the worst possible combination. He was the sort of man who talked about wine in a way that made it clear he'd read about it more than he'd drunk it. He had opinions about other people's cars. When I was still married to Greg, a structural engineer with a steady salary and an easy laugh, Roland tolerated me. I had a husband and a mortgage and a place in the seating chart. I made sense to him. Then Greg left and I stopped making sense. The divorce wasn't dramatic. He met someone at a conference in Calgary, came home and told me with the same flat tone he used to read the gas meter. 2 years later, I'd mostly stopped being angry about it. What I hadn't stopped being was tired. Single motherhood in this country is a particular kind of arithmetic, and I was doing it constantly, in my head, all day. Dance lessons or new winter boots. The good cheese or 2 extra weeks of buffer in the checking account. I'd taken the house in the settlement, which sounds like winning, until you remember a house is a series of bills wearing a disguise. My daughter was 8 that winter. I'll call her my girl because she's the whole point of this, and I want to keep her separate from the ugliness. She was the kind of kid who drew you pictures unprompted and named the squirrels in the backyard. She still believed her aunt hung the moon. That part is important. Hold on to it. When Whitney called me in early November, I almost cried on the phone, and I'm not a crier. She was bubbling. Roland had been made a partner, she said, at the firm where he did whatever it was he did with other people's commercial properties. They were throwing a celebration up at a lodge in Muskoka, a real proper do, the second Saturday of December. She wanted us there. She actually said the word us, which I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Since the divorce, I'd become a calendar conflict and maybe, we'll see. So when she said, "Come, both of you," I heard it as an olive branch held out across a long, cold silence. I should have noticed she didn't ask how I was doing, but you don't notice the things you don't want to see. I spent money I didn't really have getting us ready. A dress for me, navy, on sale, but still more than I should have spent. New tights for my girl, and a dress with a velvet collar she twirled in for 20 minutes in the kitchen. She made Roland a card. She drew him as a hockey player, which made no sense because Roland has never in his life played hockey. But she'd decided uncles were the kind of men who played hockey, and I didn't have the heart to correct her. She folded it carefully and put it in her little bag. The drive up was 2.5 hours of dark highway and her singing along to the radio in the back seat. The snow started around Gravenhurst, soft at first, then committed. By the time we pulled into the lodge's long drive, the whole property looked like a postcard somebody had paid a lot of money to live inside. Warm light spilling out of tall windows, a valet in a parka, the kind of place where the air itself feels expensive. I knew the place. Of course I knew it. But I'll get to that. We found them near the big stone fireplace in the entrance hall. Whitney looked incredible the way she always does, in a deep green dress with her hair done in soft waves that probably cost more than my whole outfit. Roland stood beside her in a navy suit, a watch a little too big for his wrist, the satisfied look of a man who believes the room has assembled in his honor. Their two kids were already parked on a leather bench, faces lit blue by their tablets. "You came," Whitney said. She didn't hug me. She gave a little wave with one manicured hand and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And you brought her." There was something in the way she said her. Like my daughter was a coat I'd forgotten to check at the door. "You said both of us," I said, still smiling, because I genuinely didn't understand yet. "Congratulations, Roland." He glanced up from his phone for about half a second. "Thanks." A young woman with a clipboard and a headset came over, all polished warmth, the event coordinator. "The Mercer party? We've got your dinner set up in the Cedar Room, table for 14. 14. I did the math without meaning to. With my girl and me, it should have been 16. "I think there's a small mix-up," I said, leaning in, doing the polite professional thing. "It should be 16. We're two more." The coordinator looked at her clipboard, then at Whitney, and Whitney didn't look at me. She was adjusting her bracelet. "No mix-up," she said lightly. "It's 14, Whitney. The seating's already arranged. You know how these formal dinners are. Everything's placed." "It's a sit-down dinner," Roland added, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. "Plated, pre-counted. You really should have confirmed if you were planning to eat with us." If I was planning to eat with us, I felt my face go hot. "You invited me," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "You said both of us. She's wearing a dress. She made you a card." Whitney sighed, that long-suffering sigh she'd perfected sometime around age 12, the one that made every disagreement sound like my failure to be reasonable. "I invited you to come up, to say hi, to celebrate with us, but honestly, this is a partner dinner. It's important people." And she's a glance down at my daughter, who was looking between the adults with the dawning, terrible awareness children get. "She's a lot in a room like this. We just wanted one nice evening without the chaos." The chaos, my 8-year-old. The one in the velvet collar holding a folded card. "Why don't you two grab something in town?" Whitney said, already turning. "There's that diner by the highway. We'll do brunch over the holidays. Might treat." And then she walked away. Just like that, Roland followed. The cousins trailed after, never looking up from their screens. I stood in that beautiful warm hall with my daughter's hand in mine, watching my own sister cross a room to a dinner I wasn't good enough to attend. For a few seconds, I genuinely couldn't breathe. There were other guests milling near the coat check, and I could feel them not watching, the particular Canadian politeness of people who've just seen something cruel and are pretending very hard that they didn't. The shame of it sat on my chest like a wet wool coat. "Mom?" My girl tugged my sleeve. Her voice had gone wobbly. "Are we not having the dinner?" I looked down at her. Her lower lip was doing the thing. She was holding that card so tightly the cardstock had started to crease. And something in me, something that had been bending and bending for 31 years, finally just stopped bending. "We're having dinner," I said. I crouched down to her level. "We are absolutely having dinner, the best one you've ever had." But Aunt Whitney said... "Aunt Whitney," I said, made a mistake. Here's the thing Whitney forgot, the thing she'd never bothered to learn, because she'd never once asked me a real question about my life. After the divorce, when I needed work that fit around a kid and school pickups, I built a consulting practice. Permits, compliance, special event licensing for hospitality properties across cottage country, liquor licenses, fire code occupancy, the endless paperwork that stands between a beautiful empty building and a room full of paying guests. Boring, invisible, essential work, the kind nobody thinks about until it's missing. This lodge had been one of my first big clients. 3 years back, when the new owners bought the place and wanted to turn it from a tired old fishing lodge into the event venue of the region, they'd hired me to untangle the whole regulatory mess. I knew this building down to its sprinkler heads. I knew its occupancy limits and its kitchen inspections, and I knew the man who ran it because I'd spent 6 months in meetings with him turning his dream into something the province would actually let him open. His name was Mr. Okenfwo, and the last time I'd seen him, he'd hugged me and called me the only person who'd ever made government paperwork feel like a gift. I straightened up and turned back to the coordinator, who was hovering, clearly uncomfortable, caught between the reservation and basic human decency. "Excuse me," I said, and my voice was not the small voice anymore. It was the one I used on the phone with provincial inspectors. "Is Mr. Okonkwo in tonight?" She blinked. "Mr. Okonkwo is, yes, he's in his office, but I'm not sure. Would you tell him that the woman who got him his assembly license is standing in his lobby and she'd love to say hello?" Something shifted in the coordinator's face. The hierarchy of the evening rearranged itself behind her eyes. "One moment," she said, and lifted a finger to her headset. I squeezed my daughter's hand. "Do you trust me?" She nodded, wide-eyed. "Good, because we are not going to that diner." I could see Whitney across the hall, settling into the cedar room, laughing at something, gesturing with a glass of sparkling wine. She had no idea. She thought she held every card. She had the husband, the money, the seating chart. She didn't know she'd shut the door in the face of the one person who'd written the rules of the house she was standing in. Let me tell you about the years before that night so you understand it wasn't just one dinner. It was a lifetime of arithmetic where I was always the one who paid. When Whitney wanted to go to a private arts high school, our parents found the money, and I went to the public one and got a part-time job to cover my own field trips. When she totaled her first car at 20, I drove her to her shifts for 4 months in the dead of a berry winter. When she met Roland and needed to seem like the kind of woman who'd read the right books and knew the right wines, it was me who coached her, me who told her which fork, which restaurant, which thing to say. I built the version of my sister that Roland fell in love with, and then I stood quietly in the back of the photo while everyone admired the work. And our grandmother's estate. I need you to remember this part because it's where the whole night turns. Our Nan had passed the previous spring. She'd left a modest estate, the house in Barrie and some savings to be split evenly between Whitney and me. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough for me, it would mean a real cushion, maybe my girl into a better school, maybe a year where I didn't lie awake doing math. The estate was still working its way through probate, and Roland, ever helpful, had insisted his firm handle the executor duties. To save on fees, he'd said. Keep it in the family. I'd let him, because that's what I did. I let people who'd never earned my trust have it anyway. Mr. Okonkwo came out of his office at something close to a run. He was a tall man in a charcoal suit, and when he saw me, his whole face opened up. "No, no, it cannot be. You did not tell me you were coming to my lodge." He crossed the hall and took both my hands, and I felt some of the ice in my chest crack and melt. "I tried to keep it quiet," I said, "but there's been a complication." He looked down at my girl. "And who is this very serious young lady?" "This is my daughter, my date for the evening." "A pleasure," he said gravely, and shook her small hand, and she beamed for the first time since we'd walked in. I leaned in so the room couldn't hear. "The Mercer dinner tonight, the partner celebration. That's my sister and her husband. I called in a favor to help them get this room. And a few minutes ago, she informed me there was no seat for me or my daughter." His face changed. He knew this industry. He knew what respect looked like and what it looked like when it was absent. He glanced toward the cedar room, where Whitney was holding court, oblivious. "She sent you away," he said quietly. "From my building?" She tried. "You will not be sent away." He said it like a vow. "Come. There is the chef's table, the space by the kitchen, the private one, with a view of the lake. It is the best seat in this entire lodge, and tonight it is empty." And then he paused, a thought crossing his face, and a slow smile followed it. "Tell me, when you arranged this for your sister, did you also arrange the rate? The friends of the house discount I extend for special bookings?" I had. I'd quietly knocked 30% off their entire evening as my gift to them, A congratulations I plan to never even mention. I did, I said. I set it up myself. And tonight, Mr. Okamfu said, watching my face, are you family of theirs, or are you a separate guest at my chef's table? I held his gaze. Tonight, I'm a separate guest. His smile widened. Then the discount no longer applies to their table. They will receive the full and honest price of everything they enjoy. It is only fair. No. The discount was a courtesy to family. And family, I'm told, only has room for 14. He turned and snapped his fingers, gentle but final, at the coordinator. Please take this lady and her daughter to the chef's table. Sparkling cider for the young miss. And for our guest, the bottle of the Niagara Reserve I keep for people I actually like. As we were led through the dining room, the whole night tilted. We weren't the leftovers anymore, we were the honored guests. The chef's table sat in a glassed-in alcove right off the open kitchen, separated from the main floor by a wall of windows. It had its own view of the frozen lake, the snow drifting down over the ice in the floodlights. And if I turned my head a few degrees to the left, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the long table in the cedar room. Whitney's table. I could watch every plate that arrived. Mom, it's like a spaceship, my girl whispered, climbing into the leather banquette. It is, isn't it? I tucked her in beside me. Tonight you order whatever you want. No looking at prices. The steak, the dessert, all of it. While she buried herself in the menu, I took out my phone. It was time. Months earlier, intending it as a surprise, I'd put my own card on file as a backup payment for the Mercer reservation, planning to quietly cover part of their evening. I still had portal access to the booking system for my consulting work. I logged in, found the reservation, and removed my card, removed the discount code I'd applied, confirmed. Then I texted Mr. Okonkwo, even though he was 20 feet away, make sure they get the full experience tonight, the tasting menu, the pairings, all of it. His reply came in seconds. They have already chosen the grand tasting, 7 courses, wine pairing for the adults, the truffle supplement. I nearly choked on my cider. The grand tasting at this lodge ran somewhere north of $400 a head before wine. The pairing was another couple hundred. With the truffle add-on, that table was looking at a number that would make most people in this province feel faint. And Whitney, my poor oblivious sister, surely thought I'd worked out some family rate where the whole night would cost them next to nothing. She had no idea the discount had just evaporated. A waiter appeared at their table with a bottle of champagne. Roland nodded along solemnly as the label was presented, doing that thing men do when they want you to believe they know wine. He didn't ask the price. Of course he didn't. He thought he was getting a deal. My phone buzzed, a text from Whitney. So glad you guys found somewhere cozy. It's wild busy here. Very fancy, lol. Well, let's do that brunch soon. Somewhere more your speed, XO. Somewhere more your speed. While she sat in a room I'd licensed, drinking wine I discounted, eating off a tasting menu in a lodge I'd helped open, pitying me. I set the phone face down. Then I picked up my glass of the Niagara Reserve and raised it very slightly toward her table. She couldn't see me through the glare on the glass, but I could see her perfectly. Mom, what's this one? My girl pointed at the menu. That, I said, is a very fancy steak from a very happy cow. You're getting it. The chef caught my eye through the kitchen pass and sent over a little plate, something delicate with smoked trout and creme fraiche on the house with a wink. It tasted like the first good thing that had happened all night. But I wasn't only there to eat, I needed to understand why. Why the cruelty tonight of all nights? I opened the app where Whitney lived her best curated life. She'd already posted a photo of champagne flutes touching, captioned, celebrating my husband, the new partner. So proud of this man and our little family. Blessed. Our little family, the phrasing again. Under it, a friend had commented, amazing! Is this the big announcement dinner? And Whitney had replied, yes, big things coming. In. Big things. But Roland's partnership was the news. What else was there? I zoomed in on the photo. On the table near Roland's elbow was a glossy folder. I couldn't read it, but I knew the crest. It was the private school in the city my girl had been waitlisted at, the one I'd never once been able to afford a deposit on. Whitney knew that. She knew it was my dream for my daughter, and there was a second folder beside it that looked, unmistakably, like a real estate listing. A cold feeling started in my stomach. Roland made partner, fine, but a partnership at a mid-sized firm doesn't pay for private school deposits and what looked like house hunting overnight, and Whitney had texted me 3 weeks ago asking to borrow $200 for groceries until payday. I'd sent it. I always sent it. Something wasn't adding up. I texted an old friend, Tess, who worked in the finance department at Roland's firm. Random question, I wrote. Did Roland's partnership come with a big buy-in payout or signing bonus? He's spending like a king tonight. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, partnership? Hun, Roland didn't make partner. He got moved sideways into a non-equity role. Same pay, fancier title. Honestly, there's talk his book of business is shrinking. Where did you hear, partner? My blood went cold and then very, very still. If there was no raise, no buy-in, no bonus, then where was the money coming from? The school deposit, the house listing, the $400 a plate dinner. And then I thought of our grandmother's estate, sitting in probate, managed by Roland's firm. As a courtesy, to save on fees. The pieces slid together and made a picture so ugly I felt sick. Nan's estate was supposed to be split evenly, half to Whitney, half to me, enough to change a life. And Roland, with his executor's access, was spending money that hadn't been distributed yet on a partnership that didn't exist in front of a sister he just made sure couldn't get close enough to ask questions. That's why there was no room for me. It was never about the seating chart. It was about keeping me at arm's length. I needed proof, and I needed to ruin their appetite. Sweetheart, I said to my girl who was happily working through a basket of warm bread, stay right here for 1 minute. Mom needs to go say hello to somebody. I stood. I smoothed my navy dress. I walked out of the alcove, down 2 steps onto the main floor and across to the cedar room, where the third course was just landing. Scallops with something phoned and golden. Everything looks delicious, I said brightly. Whitney's fork hit her plate with a clatter. Roland's face flushed a deep, ugly red. What are you doing? Whitney hissed, glancing around. I thought you left. We decided to stay, I said, resting one hand on the back of the empty chair that should have been mine. Your lodge found us a table. The chef's table, actually. The glass one by the kitchen. We've had a lovely view of you all evening. Whitney's eyes went wide. The what? It's a beautiful room, I said. You look like you're having fun, Roland. Big night, the partnership. I let it sit for a beat, or should I say the lateral move? Roland froze, a scallop halfway to his mouth. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I think you do. I kept my voice warm, almost sweet, which I've learned is far more frightening than shouting. I just heard the funniest thing, that there's no partnership, no raise. So I've been sitting over there trying to work out how a man with no raise affords a private school deposit, a house hunt, and a 7-course tasting menu for 14. Whitney had gone pale. Lower your voice. Are you worried people will hear me, I asked, or worried you will? I leaned in. Is that why there was no seat for me? Because you didn't want me close enough to do the math on where the money's coming from? You're being insane, Roland spat, finding some of his swagger. My finances are none of your business. They're not, I agreed. But Nan's estate is, and your firm is the executor, and you just spent a number of months telling everyone you'd handle it as a favor. I straightened up, looking down at the two of them in their booth. If you're spending my half of our grandmother's money before probate clears, Roland, that's not a favor. That's theft. The word landed like a dropped plate. Roland's face went from red to white. You're jealous, Whitney said, tears springing up on cue, her oldest weapon. You've always been jealous because we're successful and you're stuck. Why can't you just be happy for me for once? Stuck, I repeated, and I almost laughed. Whitney, look around this room. Who do you think got this lodge, its assembly license? Who do you think made it legal to seat all 14 of you in here tonight? She blinked. What? I consulted on this building. I know the owner. I wrote the permits you're sitting inside of. I let that land. I tried to do something kind for you tonight. I really did, but you made it very clear where I stand. So enjoy the scallops. Enjoy the wine. Just know that the family discount you were counting on is gone, because as you said, there's no room here for family like me. I turned to go. Wait. Roland was half out of his seat now, the swagger cracking into something panicked. Wait. Let's talk about this. Sir, please don't disturb the other guests, a waiter murmured at his elbow, appearing as if summoned. I walked back to the chef's table with my heart hammering and my head perfectly clear. My girl had demolished a slider the size of a teacup. Mom, the chef gave me extra fries, she announced. That's because you're the real VIP, baby. My hands were shaking, but it was the good kind of shaking, the adrenaline kind. My phone buzzed. Roland. Stop making a scene, we'll discuss the estate later. Don't do anything you'll regret. Then a second one. If you damage my reputation at the firm, I promise you'll regret it. I'm warning you. Threats. The last resort of a guilty man. I didn't answer him. Instead, I texted my lawyer, Marguerite, who was worth every overpriced minute. Emergency. I have reason to believe the executor of my grandmother's estate is misappropriating funds. I need to freeze the accounts and file for an accounting first thing Monday. Her reply came back fast for a Saturday night. On a weekend, you must be serious. If you have genuine suspicion, we can move for an interim order Monday morning. What have you got? He's spending thousands tonight on a dinner he can't afford, I wrote, lying about a promotion that didn't happen. And I've seen a private school deposit folder that matches almost exactly what the first estate distribution would be. Don't tip him off, she wrote. Don't warn him. Let me handle the paperwork. I set the phone down. The trap was set. The night wasn't done. Across the room, the mood at the long table had collapsed. The laughter was gone. Whitney was whispering furiously. Roland kept checking his phone and then his banking app, his face shining with sweat. The courses kept coming, beautiful, inexpensive, and barely touched, because they'd finally started doing the same math I had. I watched Mr. Okonkwo drift past their table. Roland flagged him down. Excuse me, Roland's voice carried in the quiet room. There's some confusion about our bill. My sister-in-law, she works with this lodge. There's a discount arranged. Mr. Okonkwo's face arranged itself into perfect, polite confusion. A discount? The courtesy rate is extended to friends and family of the house. But I understood from your reservation this evening that the lady is dining separately, that there was no room at your table for her party. Surely a discount cannot apply to someone who is not, as you say, part of the family. But she is family, Whitney burst out. She's my sister. Ah, Mr. Okonkwo nodded slowly, as if working through a difficult problem. And yet, the booking was so very specific. Room for 14. The system honors what the guest requests. He gave a small bow. Enjoy the duck. It is exquisite tonight. He walked away. Roland sank back into the booth. Whitney put her face in her hands. I felt a twinge of something. The old reflex, the one that wanted to fix it for her, smooth it over, make the bad feeling stop. Then I looked at my daughter, happily working through a sundae the size of her head, completely unaware that her own aunt had decided she wasn't worth a chair. And I let the reflex die. My phone rang, not a text, a call, my mother. She never called during conflict. She avoided it the way some people avoid the dentist. But here she was, 8:30 on a Saturday. I answered, "Hi, Mom." What in heaven's name is going on? Her voice was thin and high. Whitney is texting me in tears. She says you've crashed Roland's dinner, that you're threatening them, something about the estate. I'm eating dinner, Mom, I said calmly. Whitney invited us. Then she told us there was no room. So we got our own table? She says you're accusing Roland of stealing? Of all things, you know he's handling Nan's estate. Why must you always make everything difficult? He didn't make partner, Mom. I said it flat and plain. Silence on the line. He got moved sideways. No raise. And tonight they're spending thousands of dollars. They're putting a deposit on a private school. Where do you think that money is coming from? A long pause. That's a terrible thing to say about family. They left your granddaughter standing in a lobby tonight, I said, and my voice finally cracked. In her good dress, holding a card she made, because they wanted a nice evening without the chaos. So don't talk to me about family. I took a breath. I'm freezing the accounts Monday. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm done being the one who cleans this up. I hung up before she could answer, and my hand was trembling. Across the room, Roland was on his feet. He'd had 3 large glasses of wine in the last hour, and he swayed a little as he came. He bypassed the rope at the steps and climbed up to the chef's table, his face twisted. You. He pointed at me. You ungrateful. A line cook stepped between us, oven mitt half raised like a man ready to use it. I'm talking to my sister-in-law, Roland snapped. The whole room had gone silent. Sit down, Roland, I said, not moving. You're making a scene. You called your mother? You're poisoning everyone against me. After everything I've done for this family. Everything you've done, I said and stood. Like lying about your job. Like spending Nan's money before it's even ours. I didn't steal it, he said, far too loudly. I borrowed it. I was going to put it back when the next quarter came in. The room inhaled all at once. He'd said it, out loud, in front of 50 witnesses. Whitney had come up the steps behind him. She went very still. Roland, what did you just say? He turned, realizing, Whitney, it's complicated. You borrowed, from Nan's estate. Her voice was barely a whisper. We needed the deposit. For the school, you wanted the school. I didn't want you to steal from our grandmother, she screamed. And there it was, beautiful, terrible, vindicating chaos. Mr. Okonkwo was at the bottom of the steps, 2 large men in dark suits behind him. Mr. Mercer, he said, and his voice had gone arctic, you are disturbing my guests, and you have just admitted to a crime in front of a full dining room. I think it is time for your bill. What followed was almost quiet, the way a building is quiet right after the power cuts out. Mr. Okonkwo escorted Roland back to the long table the way a principal walks a kid to the office. A server placed a heavy leather folder on the table. Roland opened it and flinched like it had teeth. This is a mistake, he said, his voice climbing. This is $3,600. $3,640, Mr. Okonkwo corrected gently. Before gratuity, the grand tasting, 14 covers, the truffle supplement from Perigord, the upgraded Wagyu, the champagne, the reserve wines. You enjoyed it all with great enthusiasm, if I may say. For dinner? Roland was shrill now. This is robbery. It is the menu you selected, sir. Mr. Okonkwo's voice carried easily through the silent room. He'd learned theater from a master, or maybe he just had the gift. Roland's eyes shot up to the glass alcove to me. Whitney's sister, tell him about the discount. I stood and walked to the glass railing. I didn't need to shout. The room was so quiet you could hear the snow. There's no discount, Roland, I said. The discount was for family, and you made very sure tonight that there was only room for 14? I can't pay this. He slammed his hand on the table. I don't have 3,600 liquid right now. You just told the whole room you borrowed from the estate, Whitney said, picking up the folder with shaking hands. You told me a partnership, you told me a bonus, and now you can't cover dinner? She looked at the number, then at him, and I watched something in my sister's face go out like a pilot light. Did you even send the school deposit? Or did you lie about that too? Roland looked at his shoes. The silence answered for him. I have a corporate card. He fumbled a sleek black card from his wallet and shoved it at Mr. Okonkwo. Put it on the firm. I'll sort it Monday. Mr. Akonkwo took it, looking bored, and carried it to the portable terminal. He inserted it. The room held its breath. The screen flashed. Declined, he said, plainly. The issuer reports the card is not authorized. It appears your firm has canceled your privileges. The room let out a single, soft sound. It was the last brick coming out of the wall. The lateral move hadn't just been a sideways shuffle. They'd stripped him of everything. Maybe he was already gone and hiding it from his own wife. Roland sank into the booth, his face in his hands. The successful man costume had fallen all the way off, and what was left was just a frightened person in a suit he couldn't afford. Whitney reached into her purse and pulled out a plain bank card, the one from her own little account, the one she used for the candle business she ran out of the garage. I'll pay my share. And the kids? Madame, Mr. Okonkwo said gently, the bill is a single account. She looked at it again. She looked at Roland, who was crying now, quietly. And then she looked up at me, and there were tears on her face, but not the performance ones from earlier. These were real and ruinous, and they'd taken her whole careful mask down with them. She mouthed one word at me, across the whole silent room. Help? And I looked at my sister. I didn't see the snob who'd waved me off into the snow. I saw, for just a second, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because the lightning frightened her and only I could make it bearable. I saw a woman who'd just been lied to and humiliated more completely than I had been. The reflex rose up in me one last time, hard and familiar, to cross the room and fix it. And then I thought of my daughter's face in the lobby, the wobbling lip, the creased card. I can't, Whitney, I said. My voice was steady and it was sad and it was final. I really can't. You chose the table. You chose him. You chose all of this. I turned to Mr. Auchinquill. If they can't pay, you know the protocol. Indeed, he said. Theft of services. The police can sort the accounting. No, Whitney said. No police. I'll call Mom. I'll call Dad. She fumbled out her phone, hands shaking so hard she dropped it once, and dialed and put it on speaker because she'd lost the presence of mind not to. Our mother's voice filled the silence, tinny and panicked. Whitney, what's happening? Mom, I need you to come. We're at the lodge in Muskoka. Roland lied. About everything. We can't pay the bill and they're going to call the police. A pause. Then, where's your sister? Isn't she there? She's here, Whitney whispered, looking up at me. She's watching. Put her on. Whitney lifted the phone toward me. Fix this, my mother's voice said. Pay the bill and we'll settle it later. Please. For 31 years, that had been the whole arrangement. The phone, the panic, and me at the end of it, cleaning up. Pay it, fix it, smooth it over. No, Mom, I said. Not this time. I'm taking my daughter home. Whitney can wait for you to drive up. It's 2 hours. Mr. Auchinquill's a patient man. I signaled the waiter. Could you box up the rest of her steak, and we're ready for our check? Mr. Auchinquill waved a hand. Your evening is taken care of, on the house. Thank you, I said, and meant it down to my bones. I took my daughter's hand. We had to walk past the long table to reach the door. I didn't stop. I didn't look at Roland, folded into the corner like a coat that had slipped off its hanger. I looked, just once, at Whitney, sobbing into the phone, explaining to our father why she needed $3,600 she didn't have. Goodbye, Whitney, I said softly. She didn't answer, she just wept. We pushed out through the heavy doors into the night. The snow had thinned to a few drifting flakes and the cold air felt clean, almost sweet after the heat of that room. Did we win, Mom? My girl asked, looking up at me. I squeezed her mittened hand and felt lighter than I had in years. Yeah, baby, we won. The fallout came fast and it came thorough. By Monday morning, Marguerite had filed for an interim order and frozen the estate accounts. By Tuesday, the accounting had started, and it didn't take a forensic specialist to find the holes. Roland had been sloppy. He'd pulled nearly $40,000 over 6 months. School deposits, lease payments on a leased SUV, the down payment hold on a house in Oakville they'd never close on now. He'd meant to put it back, he kept saying. The judge cared about intentions exactly as much as judges ever do. He was removed as executor and ordered to repay every cent within 30 days or face charges. His firm was even less forgiving. The lateral move had been a quiet probation after a string of lost accounts. When word of the police report reached their HR department, the probation became a termination for conduct unbecoming. Whitney didn't stay with him. She couldn't. The whole structure had been built on his lies, and once the money stopped, the house of cards just sat down. They lost the rental. Roland took a room in a motel by the highway. Whitney and the kids moved back into our mother's house in Barrie. I didn't visit. I kept my distance, and I kept it kindly, and I focused on my girl and my work, and the slow, strange business of rebuilding a life that finally belonged to me. 2 months later, on a gray afternoon in February, my doorbell rang. I checked the little camera. It was Whitney. She looked different. The expensive highlights had grown out into something plainer and softer. She was in jeans and an ordinary coat. She looked tired. She looked, for the first time in years, like a person and not a portrait. I opened the door. I didn't open it wide. "Hi," she said. She didn't try to come in. "Hi." I brought her jacket. She held up a windbreaker my girl had left at our mother's months ago. Mom found it in the closet. "Thanks." I took it. She lingered on the step. She looked past me into the front hall where it was warm and smelled like the cinnamon thing I'd had simmering on the stove. "It looks nice in there." "It is." "I filed," she said. "The divorce. Dad's helping me with the lawyer. I got a job. Reception at a dental clinic off Yonge. It's not much." She gave a small, watery laugh. "But it's honest." "That's good," I said, and I meant that too. You were right. She wasn't crying, exactly. Her eyes were just very full. "About all of it, you were always the strong one. I spent my whole life standing in front of you and calling it sunshine, and the truth is you were the thing holding me up the entire time. I'm sorry for that night, for all the nights before it." I waited a moment before I answered, and I noticed that the answer, when it came, wasn't the old reflex. It wasn't the urge to rush out and save her. The thing I felt instead was the anger finally going quiet, like a kettle taken off the heat. "I appreciate you saying it," I said. She nodded and turned to go down the steps, and then turned back. "Can I?" She stopped. "Can I see her sometime?" "My niece." I know I don't have the right to ask, but my two miss her, and I miss her. I thought about it. I thought about that lobby, the velvet collar, the creased card, and I thought about my girl who'd asked about her cousins just the other day, because 8-year-olds forgive in a way the rest of us forget how to. "Not yet," I said, and I said it gently, but I said it like I meant it because I did. "You've got work to do, Whitney. Real work. You need to figure out who you are without the husband and the money and the picture. When you're solid, really solid, we'll talk about it. The girls can have a play date." She nodded slowly, and I watched her take the boundary and hold it without arguing, which was, in its own quiet way, the most hopeful thing she'd done in years. "That's fair," she said. She got to the bottom of the steps before I called after her. "Whitney, the dental clinic." She turned. "Their sign. Is it the one with the cartoon tooth that looks like it's in pain?" She let out a real laugh then, surprise out of her. "It really is." "Tell them to call me," I said. "I'll sort their branding out, family rate." She laughed again, properly, and it cracked something open in both of us at once, something old and frozen finally letting go. "Thank you," she said. I shut the door, and I stood there for a second in my own warm hall, in my own paid-for house, and then I went into the living room where my daughter was on the rug, building a city out of blocks. "Who was at the door?" she asked. "Just Aunt Whitney." "Is she coming in?" "Not today." I sat down on the floor beside her and picked up a block, a red one, and set it on the tallest tower. "Today it's just us." Just us, she said, happy like it was the best possible answer. The whole team. The whole team, I agreed. And it wasn't a lodge with a lake view. It wasn't a chef's table. But it was mine, every brick of it, and the only people inside it were the ones who'd earned the right to be. There was plenty of room, just not for everyone. I've thought a lot about that drive home through the snow, and the thing I keep landing on is that the whole night turned on one quiet decision I'd made years before anyone sat down to dinner. I chose to do the unglamorous work: permits, occupancy limits, fire codes, the paperwork nobody thanks you for. Whitney chose the picture. And on the second Saturday of December, those two choices finally met in the same room, in the room belonged to me. That's the part people miss when they watch a night like that unravel. It looks like luck. It wasn't. Roland didn't get caught because the universe felt like balancing the books. He got caught because he borrowed against a future he was lying about, and lies like that always come due. He spent money that wasn't his on a partnership that didn't exist in front of the one person who could read a permit and do the math. Cause and effect. You can hide a thing for 6 months. You cannot hide it forever. And you certainly can't hide it in a room you don't actually own. I won't pretend I'm above the satisfaction of it, because I'm not. But the satisfaction isn't really the lesson. The lesson is in the 3 things that got me through that lobby and kept me steady at that railing. The first is the simplest and the hardest, and it's just doing the right thing when it costs you. I could have paid that bill. I had the means by then, and the old reflex was screaming at me to fix it, to smooth it over, to be the good one. Choosing not to rescue Whitney wasn't cruelty. It was refusing to reward a person for treating my daughter like luggage. There's a difference between a hard heart and a clear one, and it took me 31 years to learn it. The second is paying attention. I didn't beat Roland with anger. I beat him with the boring stuff, the stuff I knew because I'd bothered to learn it. The brochure and the photo, the text from a friend in his finance department, the math that didn't add up. People who underestimate you are handing you the only advantage that actually matters, which is that you see them clearly and they don't see you at all. And the third is the plain refusal to keep bending. For most of my life, I made myself smaller so my sister could look bigger. Strength wasn't the night I stood up at the chef's table. Strength was the 2 quiet years before it, raising my girl, building a business, doing the arithmetic alone and not breaking. The standing up was just the last brick. If you take anything from my night in the snow, let it be that the people who underestimate you are not your problem to solve. Build the honest thing. Pay attention. Stop shrinking. And keep room in your warm house for the ones who earned it and only them.